Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. This morning I'm looking at an excellent book from Edward Elgar Publishing, very much part of their stable of books, their research handbook series. This one stands out again for its in its own right for some of the content. We'll get onto that in a moment. The title of the book, and it's only a short review I'm doing of this one, Research Handbook on Intellectual Property, IP, and Geographical Indications. Again, very important in the global community. It's been edited by Dev S. Ganji, so there are a lot of contributors. It's a hardback and an e-book as available, and it's part of the Research Handbooks in Intellectual Property series, which would Edward Elgar produce. Now, I've given it, Elizabeth and I talked about the book, and I've given it a title, Elgar Maintains Its Reputation for High Quality Scholarship with a Comprehensive Look at Global IP in 2016. Now, that's probably being a little bit sort of general, but actually this is what the book's really about. There's the front page, nice green. I always associate geography with green, the colour green. I don't know why. Probably because the Earth is green generally when you look at it from space. Now, and when you fly over it, there is the back. And there's quite a lot of details, some of which I've got actually in the review, just to repeat things. You've got at the bottom details about the online version, which you can get hold of. Now, the book is actually about 580 odd pages. There's the index right at the back, which you can see. I'll just show you. There's actually a detailed index, which I think is very helpful, because Elgar never failed to impress, in my view. They produce some really excellent quality publications. Let me show you the structure again. You've got footnoting at the bottom as usual, and you've got paragraph numbering. You can see that, so you should be able to find your way around the book pretty quickly. The index itself is actually referring to page numbers, not to paragraph numbering. Now, at the front of the book you've got the research handbook series. This is the handbook series on IP, and then you've got the front page there. Then you've got the detail about the online side if you're interested. Then you've got the contents. They're split up into various parts, 4 parts in total, 18 chapters. Then you've got some facts and figures and tables which are quoted, and then the list of contributors. I can't go through all of them. A large number of contributors, again, all brought together by Dev. And then they've got abbreviations, which again are very useful, of course, for this sort of thing, and then permissions given for quotes. Then you've got the introduction. There's no preface as such, but introduction, timeless signs or signs of the times. And again, he starts off with a bold statement: after existing at the margins for over a century, Geographical Indications, GI scholarship, has come of age. And that's exactly what the book is doing. Now, it's a detailed book. It's not a book, handbook, which you can just pick up and read. There's a lot of detail in it, and it actually, you've got to have some knowledge of what we're talking about, so that you can understand the points which the editor and the contributors are actually making in the individual contributions. But the book itself, I think, is of great value, and again, very much part and parcel of Elgar's publication concepts as an independent publisher. But what we say is here, 20 contributors have brought an excellent new approach to the world of intellectual property and what are described as geographical indications, an intriguing journey into what has developed quickly into what is actually a global field of law today. And again, I'm going to make comments which I think probably are not some ones that are that controversial at the end of the day. Provenance matters, of course, like never before, especially in IP matters, and emotions come into it. And we're seeing a lot of publicity, actually, on the media, television, in the newspapers and so forth, about matters involving intellectual property, and I'm sure it's going to continue as the years unfold. Legal regimes regulating the use of geographical indications, that's GIs, protect commercially valuable signs on products such as Darjeeling and champagne. And I'm sure anybody who's spent time with EU studies, European Union law studies, or what I did, which was the old EC, the old common market law, which was developing when I first started, will remember some of the interesting discussions, specifically actually on champagne and its provenance. And it signals the link, of course, with things like champagne and Darjeeling, and of course, remember Italy with various matters there. It actually is the regions of origin. So such regimes have been controversial for over a century. And it's not something that's actually that new, but it's something that I think has become more noticeable to ordinary members of the public as we're more informed. And of course we have much more advertising today, and many more people have, especially certainly in Western Europe, have a much higher standard of living. So they're going to come into contact with things like champagne and Darjeeling tea instead of your normal builder's tea, for instance. I'm just saying that not as a social commentary, but just as a factual statement about the way that society has developed. The editor, therefore, has assembled a rich interdisciplinary work of scholarship. I'm going to quote a few things here. And the research handbook explores the reasons for and consequences of geographical indications existing as a distinct category within IP itself. And of course, we think that historians, geographers, sociologists, economists and anthropologists can join intellectual property specialists to explore the distinguishing features of GIs, that certain products are distinctly linked or anchored to specific places. And as I say, that's the case law itself is fascinating. And I have always found some of the European Union case law to be what I would describe as tedious to read. But the fact is that some of these subjects are quite good to teach, because when you're actually teaching the students, you can make they will identify quite quickly with the subject matter. So that does make it a bit easier. It's a little bit like the law of tort, which of course is where intellectual property emerged from in the first place, effectively. But I mean, tort is a wonderful subject because of the human nature of it all and the human situations. So of course it is useful, and therefore not as boring as one might think. The distinctive feature of this book, of course, is that it reflects a multidisciplinary conversation, that's their word, between legal scholars, policymakers, practitioners, historians, geographers, etc., all the ones I mentioned before. So we think that you will all, in the different areas, come together because IP actually steps over one boundary and covers a much wider area of interest. And of course it is, if you're involved in that professionally, a fascinating area of law itself and activity, business activity. Experienced contributors from across these domains have thematically explored, and there are actually 4 elements which I've listed, and they're listed actually in the book as well. That's the history and conceptual underpinning of the GI as a legal category, very valid. The effectiveness of international protection regimes, the practical operation of domestic protection regimes, and long unresolved as well as emerging critical issues. They're not going away, and in fact, if anything, because money is involved, they're going to become more important. Specific topics which are covered in the handbook include a detailed interrogation of the history and functions of terroir and the present state as well as future state potential of international geographical indications protection. That includes the Lisbon Agreement of 2015, and there also covers such matters as conflicts between trademarks and GIs, the potential for GIs to contribute to rural or territorial development, as well as sustain traditional or indigenous knowledge, and the vexed question of generic use. So I think probably politicians will find this quite important too. The book itself, though, is actually a technical one to a certain extent, very much, if I can put it that way, the high style of Elgar, which we've come to accept and love, because Elgar do give us a wonderful service, certainly as lawyers, and obviously in other fields as well. But I'd like to thank them now for that. Let me just conclude by saying that the book's intention is for all those who have an interest in geographical indications across a range of disciplinary backgrounds, which is what I've said before. So I do think it's got a wide appeal. Students, scholars and policymakers and practitioners, and I say policymakers, I mean politicians and civil servants, both at the Commission and in Westminster, I think will find this handbook to be an invaluable resource. And as I've said before, we do continue to be very grateful to Edward Elgar and their team for the high standard and services that they offer us. Thank you for the specialist library services and titles you give us. We're very grateful for that. Here's the book again. There's the front, there's the spine, and then there's the back. Just opening it in the middle. A history of Australia's wine GI's legislation. New EU-Australia wine treaty. See, we're talking big money here. We're not talking of small money. Again, that goes straight to a particular, very important, resolving conflicts between trademarks and GIs. Again, very important. I have to say it's not something that I had given that much consideration to, and when I saw the book, a few sort of things just fell into place. Well, thank you, Dev Ganji, very much, and also all of the 20 contributors. I'm very pleased that they were able to come and give us all this information. It's extremely helpful. It's an excellent book and certainly should be in anybody's IP library rather. Thank you very much indeed to all concerned. Bye-bye.